In episode 1 of this series, I talked about how what I do in my spare time is I look around for good quality used bikes that I can get at a really good price, and then I fix them up, make them as good as possible, and sell them for just enough money to buy another project bike, just so I always have a project bike on the go for the fun of it. This is the project bike that I had going before I even started filming the last video. It's a McNeil Gary Young, so great quality bike, Canadian brand. Gary Young's a fantastic rider, and his frame really shows it. And this one's built with some pretty good parts. So Primo front hub, Haro rear wheel, it's got an Odyssey tire on it, it's got Redline device cranks, it's got really nice stuff on here. Because Jonathan gave me that Subrosa as a free project bike, I don't really have to do anything specific with this one. I don't have to sell it to make my money back. So as a favor for Jonathan, I'm going to rebuild his old bike with the parts from this one. So this frame you might see in another video later when I decide to rebuild it, but it's probably going to be sitting around for quite a while. It's a nice frame. Now Jonathan really likes certain colors on his bike builds. He likes orange and he likes red. So to get his bike built the way he's really going to want it, I'm going to have to undo quite a bit of the work I did to this bike in the last video. But that means I can make this bike a little bit more the way I like it and how I actually want to ride it before I decide if I want to sell it or keep it. So first I'm getting rid of those fit tires, because they worked, but they really sucked. So I'm putting some slightly better ones on here, a little bit skinnier, but also a little bit lighter, made with some better quality rubber. They're a bit more supple, so they'll make the bike handle really nicely. The next thing I want to get rid of is those cranks. Oh god, those cranks. H-spline pinch bolt cranks, no matter what brand they are, no matter how good they are, they all creak, they all need to be tightened all the time. So whenever possible, I like to switch them out for a press fit style 48 spline crank. And they're actually not that expensive to get one of these. You can get them used, like, $50, or find a used bike that has one on it. In this case, I'm using the one from that green McNeil as the donor crank. These Redline device cranks were really popular for a long time, and this pair is actually in great shape, so it's still going to last a really long time for this build. This chain is going to come off eventually, but for now I'm just kind of trimming it a little bit and getting rid of the half link. The half link was necessary with the last tire setup because they were so wide that the wheel had to be a bit further back to clear the brakes, but the slightly slimmer tire fits perfectly fine with the wheel a bit further into the dropout, so I'm going to keep it as slammed as possible. A lot of used bikes that you can get either don't have grease, like they weren't built with grease, or the grease is so old that it's just dried up and it's not doing its job anymore. So re-greasing parts on old bikes is really important. So by taking the pegs off and putting on some slightly lighter parts, we've actually saved a fair amount of weight here. It's kind of impressive. It was that quick and that easy. Now normally I don't like the way green looks on bikes, but I have to say, after moving all the parts over from that other build and building this one up just the way I like it, it actually looks really good. Like the chrome and green go really well together. So we've got the Primo front hub, we've got the Shadow Conspiracy step, we've got the Fiend seat with the McNeil seat post and the S&M seat collar, we've got the Redline device cranks and a 25 tooth Haro sprocket, the Odyssey Path rear tire. and we have the Haro Hypno Complete wheel in the back. One of the benefits to working in a bike shop in the winter is sometimes you can snake one of these for a few months. This is a truing stand, so it lets me do all this work at home. So this is the rear wheel. I used the hub from the last episode and a new rim with the same lacing technique, so nothing that I really need to show here. I just moved the rim over. For the other wheel, I'm using a cheap used hub because it's orange, and Jonathan loves orange. I'm using used spokes because they're what I have lying around, so I'm going to have to grease every single one because they're already a little bit rusty. The rim is basically unused. It is used, but it was only used for, I think, a couple weeks on an older build, and, it's basically new. So it's going to be a nice shiny wheel set, and it's going to look good, it's going to ride great. I feel like this truing stand is so useful that one of these days I'm gonna have to get one for my little home bike shop. Like, I can lace wheels at home, but without this during the summer it's really tricky, so I end up having to do all my work at the bike shop. So, with the wheels done, this is the build I have all laid out for Jonathan's bike. We've got shadow pedals, we've got red cranks from Rant, I believe, we've got a 28-tooth Haro sprocket, we've got a Subrosa stem, we've got Fiend bars, we've got a Salt Plus brake lever, we've got a McNeil fork, we got specialized tires, and we got the custom wheels. So this is going to be good. And so Jonathan brings the frame. The build starts on this old beat-up Redline frame. I mean, it was a nice frame when it was new. It's the Link 7.1, so full chromoly, extra large top tube, just like the frame I showed at the beginning of the video, but this one's way more beat up. It's going to need a lot of grease, and it's going to need a lot of love to make this thing ride nicely. It's kind of a funny story, but when I first started hanging out with Jonathan, he wasn't really serious about BMX. So he actually used to run his brake lever on the left hand so that he could text with his right hand while he was riding. He got over that pretty quickly though, so don't judge him too much. Hey, guess what? This guy likes orange so much that his new bike matches his shirt and matches his hat and matches his brand new car. The dots are kind of a throwback to what we used to do to our bikes back in high school. The theme was kind of inspired by the tribal vinyls in the old Need for Speed games and some custom bikes I had seen rolling around at the time. In this case, I'm mostly just doing them to cover chips in the paint and give it a little bit of protection until the summer when we can repaint this frame properly. So this build actually turned out pretty much exactly the way I wanted it to. It's the perfect Jonathan bike. It's orange and red, it's got a brake, it's got 4 pegs, it's nice and long so it's going to be comfortable, and it's got a bit of a sticker bomb, and it's got our old RNF&R logo. This was inspired by a Slash album, and we kind of wrote that on a lot of the stuff we had back then. And so the only thing left to do is test the bikes. This was filmed over Christmas, so Jonathan was actually busy with his family while we filmed this last little bit, so I had Nash, the usual Boss Culture connection, to help me out with filming this bit. Downhill, the orange bike we built for Jonathan feels super stable. It's a fantastic bike for him. He mostly uses bikes like this as cruisers. So it's perfect. It's exactly what we wanted. I've still got to try a couple tricks on both of these bikes though. So the Subrosa actually does pretty good. Basically all of the problems I talked about in the last episode have been solved. The new tires make it feel a lot more lively, and switching to a 25:9 gear ratio makes it feel a lot easier as well. The orange bike, whoa, this thing is a tank. So I can do some tricks on it, but everything's like in slow motion. I have to put a lot more work into this bike than on the silver Subrosa. It does give you lots of room to do X-up rides though with that long top tube. This doesn't usually take more than one try. I can usually do this one first try. So this part of the project is done. For the price of one entry-level beginner basic BMX, we have two really nice customized BMX bikes. After filming this, Jonathan took home his bike and I put the silver Subrosa on Kijiji, and I found a guy who was super stoked to take it off my hands. He gave me a good price for it, but he was super thrilled to have a bike that looked this good. So in the end, everyone's happy. The potential of used bikes is enormous, and really shouldn't be ignored by most cyclists. You can do so many things with used bikes for so little money. They have so much potential that needs to be looked into.